Hello, Gareth here, and welcome to my studio. So in this lesson we're going to paint big white fluffy clouds. So this is the painting that we are going to do. So maybe I should tell you a little about the place. So it's called Shikashima Island, and it's in Fukuoka prefecture, Japan. And I visited this island in 2016, and it took about 10 minutes to drive around the whole island. Very small, but on the far side, that's where I saw this scene, and what a beautiful scene. And hopefully you'll be able to see the photograph here. So a very, very beautiful place. So this lesson, I wanted to make it as simple as possible, and I was hoping to call it a beginner lesson. But after doing the painting, I thought maybe it's more an intermediate lesson. But if you are a beginner, please have a go and let me know how you get on with it. I think you will learn a lot. So one of the main reasons I decided it's an intermediate lesson rather than a beginner lesson is doing the sky. When we do the sky, we'll be doing wet in wet, and it really is quite challenging to keep these white areas and also to create very, very dark grays, and you'll probably find that out. So I hope it goes well for you. If it doesn't, please don't be disheartened, because it is very challenging, but with practice you will get there. The other elements are fairly easy, I think. Well, this distant mountain, that's also done wet in wet, and that is a bit challenging. So it's challenging because we want it to look faint, but we still want to be able to see it. And it's very tricky to do that, to achieve that. But you're going to see how I have a go at that, and then you'll get the chance too. Now we do dry brush for the sea, and I show you how to do that. And I think you should be able to do that fairly easily. And then the rocks are super easy. Well, kind of. Doing the grey bit is very easy, but when I went to do the highlights, I did fairly well until I did this rock, and then I really struggled. So if you watch the video, you can watch me sweat, and then maybe you can enjoy that. I had such a difficult time doing the highlight on this rock. And then above the rock, we've got some birds. So the reason why I added the birds was because I had a spot of paint in the sky. And one of the ways you can hide that is by painting a bird. So you'll see me do that. And also I had great difficulty painting this bird. So you can watch me struggle if you like. But eventually I got there. So that's all for the introduction. Now briefly I'm going to talk about the process, and then after that we'll dive straight into the painting. It's about 6 or 7 stages, but some of the stages are very, very simple. Then after that I'll do a review, and then I'll show you the framed painting, and at the very end I'll talk about materials, and that's it. Now I'm going to talk about my process. So it's quite simple, and first of all I'm going to do the sky, and I'm going to wet the paper, and I'm going to do a wet in wet sky, so hopefully I get a very soft looking sky. Now the first thing I'm going to paint is the blue. So if I look at this picture carefully, I can see that there's some blue here, roughly, some blue here, and some blue here. And then we've got a little bit here and a little bit here. So that's mostly the blue, and then some little bits here. But the main bits are here, number 1, number 2, number 3, and then 4, 5, and then 6 are little bits. Then next I'm going to do the grey. So I've got grey here. This is one big bit of grey. Now it's important to keep the white between the blue sky and the grey clouds, and there's a real, look at here how much white there is, a lot of white, and here too. So be very careful not to paint all of it. And then there's a little bit of grey there at the top, then a lot of grey here, and then here's some grey, little bits here in the middle. And then lower down we've got grey here and here and here, but I think that's more of a bluey grey, and I will change that colour a little. Now after I've done that, I'm going to do an even darker grey. It will give the sky a bit more depth, and you've got that darker grey here and here and here. It's not exactly right, but just as long as I roughly get a little bit of dark grey within the light grey, it will look quite good. But these lower clouds here, here and here, they don't have that dark grey, and that's very important. Okay, so after that I'm going to let all of that dry, and then I'm going to do this distant mountain or mountains. So this is actually quite difficult because you want it to be faint, but at the same time you want to be able to see it. And we're going to be doing it wet in wet, but timing is very important, and also having the right thickness of mix. So that will be quite challenging. Then after that there's some mainland. Let's get another colour. Let's go for green. Goodness me, this is colourful. That you can't see it in this picture, so let's look at my other picture. Just a minute. Okay, let's close that and let's open this, and I'm going to be doing this here. Whoops, wrong colour. Let's go for green. Okay, so I'm going to do this bit of rocky land here. I've erased it a little bit, but I'm going to do that. Then after that I'm going to do dry brush all the way down for the sea, all the way down here. And then I'm going to let that dry and then do dry brush again, but I'm going to go a bit darker, and this just looks much better. It gives just more depth, or I'm not sure what exactly the word is, but it does look a lot better. And then finally I'm going to do the rocks. Wow, this is a horrible colour. Now I'm not going to do that rock because I'm going to make this rock here my focal point, and I'm going to move it over here. And by the way, the land or sea area is going to be quite a small space. It will probably end about here, so I'm not really going to show any of this area. I'll move this rock over here and I'll make it a bit taller like that. Then I'll get rid of this one, and then down here I'm just going to have a few rocks like that, just a few. And then finally I'm going to have some highlights, just a few highlights on this rock here, then here, here. Just a few highlights like this. And that really is the whole painting. Let's paint. So first I'm getting this flat brush. It's 1 inch or 2.5 centimeters, and I'm wetting my paper. I've got a little touch or touches of paint on here, and I'm removing them. So that's why I'm doing a lot of brushing. So if your paper is dirty, if you've got some paint on it from previous paintings or just some splatter, you can remove it by doing this. So it's nice and wet. So what I'm going to do first is the blue areas. So I'm using my, I think it's cobalt turquoise light. So the paper is very wet at the moment, and so if I've got a watery mix, it's going to spread very quickly. We don't want that, so I'm waiting just a little, and I'm making my mix thicker. Another important thing is to make big fluffy white clouds, we really need to leave lots of white space, and it's a lot easier to say that than to do that. So I'm looking very carefully now at the painting, sorry, the photograph, and I'm looking for where the blue areas are, roughly. So there's blue here, there's some blue here, and there's a bit of blue here. And then at the bottom, it becomes quite complicated, and the blue becomes a lot lighter. So I want to begin there, but actually the blue begins all the way over here. So you really have to look carefully and see where the blue bit begins. Try to see where the center line is and then compare it to that. So I thought the blue actually began here, but when I see the center line, or imagine roughly where the center line is on the photo, I realized that the blue bit begins over here. So it's surprising how your judgment can be a bit off. So carefully take your time, look at the shape, look at the blue shape, and just see what it's doing. And then over here, it's very complicated, so it's really important to simplify. Look at the basic blue areas. There's basically 1, 2, 3, and a little bit there. And then slowly we get lots of gaps or lots of bits of blue, and it gets lighter, much lighter. But still, we've got to try and see the basic shape. Otherwise, we're going to get lost in all the details. There we go. And then let's darken this blue with some phthalo blue. Wow, that's a lot. And maybe here. Notice how I use my rag. That's so important. You need to get rid of excess water most of the time, and so the way you do that is by using your rag. Oh, I've got some little bits there of something. I can't emphasize enough just how important your rag is. And I'm changing this a little. I'm making it a little bigger than it really is. And we have to be careful around the edges because of water pooling up. So you just kind of play with it and spread the water around a bit, and then should be okay. Now I'm spraying. Never spray at, spray horizontally and let the drops gently fall down onto the paper. That way you don't shift paint. Now we're going to do the grey area. So we use the light blue again and a touch of red. Now this is where I think we will, well, where there's a high chance of really screwing up the painting. I'll add a touch of yellow ochre to that. So it's phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, and a touch of yellow ochre. Now the reason we'll screw up here is because we'll probably paint all the white, paint over all the white areas. It happens. I don't know why. It's just the way the brain is. It wants to just paint all the white areas, and of course if you do that, we've got no more lovely fluffy white clouds. Okay, I need to work a bit quick here. It's dried out here, but in a way I'm wetting it again. Not in a way, I am. I'm wetting it again by doing this. And yeah, we have to be careful with this edge. We have to make it look like it's a cloud shape. So I'm being very careful with the edge there, that it looks nice. Okay, and then I'm going to spray that again. Here we go. Horizontal, don't forget, let the drops fall down. And now at the, yeah, I think what I'm going to do now is the bottom bit. So I'm going to add a touch more blue to this grey. And then here, I just have to be careful. It might be wet at the bottom, but dry at the top, because the paper is slanted, and so the water's running down, yeah, gravity. And so we have to try to remember that and work with that. So spraying does help us to keep the top part wet for a bit longer. That's why the spray bottle is absolutely essential. You really need one, 100%. You're really handicapping yourself if you don't have a spray bottle. You're just making it really hard for yourself. Oh, that's actually looking quite nice, but be careful, because when this dries, And look, I'm going to get a cauliflower there. When this dries, it's going to all become fainter. So now we're going to go in with some Punchy Darks. So again, phthalo blue, alizarin crimson and yellow ochre. But now we've got a thick mix. And what I do with this area here is dab here. So this is very dry now. I'm going to basically just cover it up with a thick mix. And keep dabbing. And then over here. So I know it can be a bit nerve-wracking. It is for me. And maybe you're worried about getting the painting done quickly, but try to make nice brush strokes. Don't paint so quickly that you forget to make nice marks. So that looks quite nice, right? I think. And this, goodness me, this is still expanding, so we've got a bit of a problem here. Hopefully it will stop soon. If it doesn't, I'll wipe it all away and begin again with a dry brush. And here I'm trying to blend this into the lighter grey, which I want to retain. The problem is I might cover it all up and then it's going to look a bit boring. So we want to retain this lighter grey if possible. Okay, I think that's beginning to look quite nice. So I have to be so careful here that I don't overdo it. I don't cover everything in this grey. And I'm just making sure that these edges look quite nice. And I think that's more or less it. Yep, I'm just not happy with this. So what I'm going to do is emergency, wet my brush, wipe it, use tissue. I'm going to soak up this water. Get rid of that. I'm pressing a bit too hard actually. I have to be a bit careful. And then I'm going to go over that again. And hopefully we're going to hide it. But this is tricky to do because you've got to get your mix just right. Not too wet, because then we'll just create a new cauliflower, but not so dry that it's like applying toothpaste almost. Look how I use my rag. That's my safety. It really is important. Okay. Now that's a bit darker than I wanted, but it will fade hopefully. And then I might just do some blue there again. Just a minute. Just blend this in a nice way. Yeah. I might just do some blue using my rag so it's not too wet at the top here. Now that's too wet. So use a very thick mix now. And hopefully we can blend this in. Maybe it's okay. Looks a bit too dramatic, but there you go. And then spray again, not at, over. And then here, I think there's a little bit more blue we should add around here, light blue. It's a little bit complicated just here. And maybe down here too. But can you see I'm just doing a little and I'm trying to retain that white. It's actually grey there, but maybe we'll get away with it. There is a certain fudging things in painting. And there's nothing wrong with that. Okay, and here there's a few little holes in these white clouds. Yep. Okay. And hopefully that's it. This does look a bit dark. Oh, I'm losing my whites there. So that wasn't a good idea what I did there. And I've done it a bit more. But hopefully it's still good enough. That one is lovely. That one is lovely. That will do. I can't really wipe it away. I might try. We'll see what happens. Clean my brush. Wipe it on tissue. That's what I mean though. Very quickly you can just remove these beautiful whites. Cover them with grey. It happens so easily. Yep. Wet. Dab on rag. Tissue. And let's have another go. And then the heavy artillery. Let's use tissue directly. Make it pointed so we don't take paint from other areas where we want to keep it. And then get a clean bit. And that's come out pretty well, I think. It just looks a bit too even. So we need to make it a bit more irregular, like clouds are. So maybe it was good I made that mistake, because you're seeing how to correct things. And here it's a softer grey, so I'm going to use my finger. You have to be really careful when you do this, and only one time, one finger, because your finger gets dirty. And I'm just softening that grey. Yeah, I think that will do. Okay, so I was going to say let's leave that to dry, but we can go down to the bottom and do a sparkly sea. Wow, this whole wash has taken about 20 minutes, quite long. So I'm mixing up some of this grey from phthalo blue, alizarin crimson and yellow ochre, making a lovely watery mix. And then at the bottom I'm going across. But you should get scrap paper first and test it on that, just to see you're going to get a dry brush effect. And I'll start at the bottom, because here we have to be very careful. Yeah, I think this needs to be a bit bluer. There we go, that's a bit bluer. I got a little bit of something there, I don't know what, but anyway, got rid of it. There we go. Dry brush. So to get dry brush, you need to move the brush fairly quickly, and first of all, try it out on some scrap paper, and then once you get the effect, just apply it to your proper painting. Okay, I'm just having a look, seeing if anything's really wrong. I don't think so. I can't say I'm super happy with that cloud for some reason. And maybe this one should be a bit darker. But I think now we're at a stage where it's dangerous to touch this now because it's dried too much. It's not completely dry, but it's getting very close to that point. So let's allow it to dry completely. The paper has now dried, and that's the end of stage 1. It was a really big stage. Now, stage 2 is actually a very short stage, but still quite a tricky one. So we're going to do some distant mountains here, very distant. So what we do is we get some water on our flat brush, hopefully not too much. So the way we make sure it's not too much is by dabbing on this towel. I'll turn that over because it's a bit dirty. Use the other side. Then I'm going to go across here. Now be careful that you don't touch these clouds too much, because what might happen is you catch some of the pigment and you move it, and then that will create an ugly line. So be very careful about that. Then I get my pointed oval brush and some cobalt turquoise light, a touch of red, just a touch, and then mix that up a bit more, and then look how I use the rag. That's so important. That's my break. And then here we go. So I'm looking very carefully now at what's happening here. How quickly is it spreading? And you can see here it's dry. So I better hurry up because some other areas might be dry. So here, it goes up a little and then it comes down. This is actually very tricky. And you want to try and make sure that it all stays horizontal. So I'm not completely happy with this, but hopefully I can improve it. That's actually not too bad. And let's leave that now to dry. So I'm just squinting my eyes and checking this line at the bottom and making sure that it is horizontal and not slanted. If it's slanted, it's really going to spoil your painting. So I think that's looking good. Where I started, I think, was the wettest area, and it's still spreading there, but over here it's not really spreading, or here. So that's an important thing to remember. Certain areas are more moist than other areas. Okay, let's leave that to dry. Like I said, a very quick stage, this stage 2, but a bit of a tricky one, even though it's just for a small thing, which is a distant mountain. So do your best, and yeah, that's it really. Do your best, and remember, if it does go wrong, it is quite a tricky thing that you're trying to do. So be easygoing on yourself. This has dried, but if you have quite a hard edge, then you can soften it by using this brush. And what you do is dip it in the water, then dab it on the rag, just a little, and then you go over this, maybe about 3 or 4 times. Now, I'm quite happy with this, so I'm not going to do that. And also, it's going to take a while, because after you do that, you're going to have to wait for that to dry, and it could take about 15 or 20 minutes. Of course, you could use a hairdryer, which would speed up the process, but I'm fairly happy with this, and so I'm not going to do that, but you might want to. Okay, next we're going to do a distant bit of land, which is here. It's closer than these mountains, and then we're going to do some sea sparkle, which is basically just dry brush. So I'm going to make a grey, so I get some phthalo blue, some alizarin crimson, and a touch of yellow ochre. So when you mix paints, sometimes if you pick up too much paint, what you do is, if you can, scrape it back into the slot, or if your mix is here, begin outside and do that. Then you get rid of the excess, and then when you've got the right amount, then add it. And you can even add it on the outside of the mix, and you don't have to mix the whole lot up. So just a little bit of mixing advice there. Okay, I'm getting the colour that I want. Maybe a touch more yellow ochre. Maybe a little bit more watery. Let's test it out. So always have scrap paper. I think that's a bit too strong, and I think I'm going to make it lighter with a touch of this blue. I'm going to blue it off. Let's see what this looks like. Yeah, can you see the difference? This is a cooler grey now because of this blue, and I prefer that. So I'm going to put my hand on the paper because I need a lot of control here. And if my hand is not on the paper, it's much more difficult to control the brush. So that was a bit tricky, to be honest. Then I've got a bit of excess water, dab on the rag, And then I've got these little mounds that go up like that, and then another one like that. There we go. And that looks quite nice. I'm very happy with that. And I dab my brush a lot, get rid of the water, then I come in here and get rid of excess water here. Be very careful. It can begin to pool here and then give you an ugly cauliflower. The next thing is the dry brush sea sparkle. So I'm going to add a bit more blue to this, a bit more water, and people say dry brush is difficult, and maybe it is difficult to get the effect at first, but there's no excuses for not being able to produce it correctly on your final painting, because if you get some scrap paper, you can keep playing around with it until you get exactly the mark you want, and then we can go on the paper. So and if some of your lines are not purely horizontal, just keep doing lines above them, because the correct ones will hide the ones that are wrong. Now, if you've got paper that's buckling a lot, this technique is not going to work. One of the reasons I use a spiral bound pad is because it doesn't make the whole, whoops, sorry about that, I was covering it up. It doesn't make the whole pad buckle. With some of those blocks where the sides of the paper are glued down, I find that when I wet the paper, the whole block buckles. And when it dries out, the buckles do go down, but not completely. And so I've got these undulations in the paper. And when I do this dry brush, it just catches on the top parts where it goes up. And that was extremely frustrating. That really got me down. So nowadays I use a spiral bound pad. Of course, separate sheets would also work that are taped down to a hard board with something like masking tape or clips. That will also work. And if you do have a block, you can remove the top sheet except for the top side. So you can kind of open it like this, and then at the bottom you can add clips, and that might be a bit better. It might be. That looks really nice. Let's leave that to dry. This has now dried, and we're moving on to stage 4. And stage 4 really isn't much of a stage, because all we're doing is dry brush again, but a bit darker. So the same mix, phthalo blue, alizarin crimson, and a touch of yellow ochre. Then we get our scrap paper again. Maybe it's a bit too strong. I'm going to add a little bit of the cobalt turquoise light. I'll just call it turquoise because it's too much of a mouthful. Okay, and I think that will do. Maybe a little darker. Yeah, okay, here we go. So maybe about here. Really, it just has to be darker. Now, because I'm doing videoing, I don't really want to move my paper, but actually I'm going to, because I'm right-handed and it's easier for me to go this way from left to right, and of course the inverse if you're left-handed. So what I'm going to do is turn my paper around like that, and then I'm going to do from here, because it's much easier for me to do that stroke this way. Let's keep going. And what a beautiful dry brush effect we've got. And I might even do one a bit thicker in the middle. We'll see how this goes. Because maybe we want some variety within this. Maybe it's too even, like that. So just having a step back, squinting my eyes and having a look and a think. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that. So let's leave that to dry, and then stage 5 is the rocks, the rocky shore. In this stage we're going to do the rocks, and it's basically the same mix as the grey in the clouds and in the sea. It's just phthalo blue, alizarin crimson and yellow ochre, and just mix that up. I might add a little bit of turquoise just to give it a bit of a bluish, light blue tinge. And then a bit of yellow ochre, see what that looks like. Okay, so, okay, more red, make it stronger. More yellow ochre, I think that will do. Now, I'm just going to do it all more or less one colour, which will be very easy to do, and we can just focus on the shapes and getting the shapes right, because the highlights I will do with white paint. So I'm basically going to do just one main bit of rock in the middle of the sea, and that will be our focal point, and I think I will do it about here. So I'm going to make it bigger than it actually is. So it's roughly like a triangle. So first, just do a triangle, and then we can modify that. Have it come across, have it come down, like that. In the photograph, this rock looks quite strange because it looks spiky, and the reason it looks spiky is because there are a lot of birds on this rock, and I'm not going to draw them. Maybe I should. Maybe painting them flying off the rock actually might be good. At some point I'm going to have to do that. That might be today, but might not be. Okay. We can take our time with that and get it right. So then we've got some smaller rocks in the sea. There. Just little blobs and like little clusters. And then it's almost like a slanting angle of rocks. So one here, then some more here. So often I'm doing either a triangular shape like that or a kind of brick shape like that. Sometimes, like in the distance, it might be a thin line, and in that way we get our rocky shoreline. But I am squinting my eyes a lot to make sure that overall it looks really good. And now that we've added these dark rocks, can you see how sparkly the sea looks? Okay, I think that's looking good. I'm just going to spray it to keep it wet, because we haven't finished yet. There's one more thing. So you can use a liner brush, but I like this very long and thin bamboo brush. It cost me about $30. Can you believe that? But I just looked at it and I thought, yeah, this is going to be a good brush. Sometimes it's worth spending the money. Whoops. So what I'm going to try and do here is some thin lines under the rocks. And my mix is probably a bit too watery, and so I'm finding this quite difficult to do. This one is the most important one because it's the focal point, so we really want to get the reflection right with this one. And then I think the others are pretty much okay. I'm just filling in some white gaps, maybe add a few darks in here. Like that. And then I'm just going to do a few ripples in the water. And I'm doing them in the foreground. I want them as straight as possible. I'm squinting my eyes just to make sure that it looks good. Yeah, I think that's it. It really does look sparkly, doesn't it? So let's leave that to dry, and then we're going to do the highlights. It's looking really good. Now it has dried, and I'm going to get my titanium white and use my Japanese bamboo brush. Here it is. So I'm going to take some of this white. Now, I don't think I'm going to use pure white. I'm going to add a touch of this grey. And we'll see what it looks like. So it's got a lovely fine point, this brush. And I think this is stage 7. Goodness me. Okay, so here we go. I want it a bit thicker. If possible, I want a slight dry brush effect. So I'm just doing lines and dots. I think, that's a bit strange there, but I think it works now. It was just a straight line going across. I think that's looking good. And then finally, this one, I left this to the end because this is the most important one. I guess the sun is over here, and so I just wanted, in a way, to warm up by doing these rocks first before I do this final one. And now I'm just going to take my time and have a look. Well, in a minute. I'm not sure how much that really comes out, so I might make that even whiter because it needs to stick out. maybe have a little bit coming off like that. I'm not happy with it. It's not quite right. Maybe now. Okay. Am I happy with it now? Maybe. So yeah, the sun's over here coming down on that. It's not too bad. Whoops. So I'm just now having a look. No, I'm painting again. Okay, maybe that's better. Let's have a look. This is fine. Maybe not. Maybe a few bright highlights. Just a few. That will hopefully make the painting pop. Okay. So I think I'm going to get rid of that now. It's not too bad. So this is just water, and I'm just blending it in. Then wash that out, wipe it. Oh dear. I hope this doesn't happen to you. So I'm going in with some bigger, with some black paint or dark mix, and hopefully this time I can cover it up. Okay. The edge needs to be nicer, I think. I think that's better. Okay. So, and what I might do now is a few birds around this rock, and I can cover up this little dot here. So, wow, that was a little bit more difficult than I thought it would be. So I have to check my hand. I've got white paint on my hand. Ooh dear. So be careful. So there's one bird. Another bird. There's another one. And shall I do one more maybe up here? And there's another bird. And I think, yeah, just a few simple strokes and you've got like a bird. And I might do one bird here. Hopefully I won't regret this. It's just about to fly off the rock. And then that mark there. Okay, so that one a little bit wrong, so I'm just going to erase that a little. Very delicate work here. And then get some more paint. And hopefully there we go. That's meant to be a bird. What do you think? Does it look like a bird? No, maybe not. Okay, let's get rid of it. I think it doesn't look quite like a bird. So this is just water. Just quickly wet it, then clean tissue, dab it, and let's have one more go. Maybe I should leave it, I don't know. Get some clean tissue. Maybe I bit off more than I can chew by doing these birds. So let's have it, let's have a look on some scrap paper. Let's have it just going up. Let's have it just going, flying up off the rock. Quite a dramatic painting, maybe like that. Okay, kind of like an X shape. So just above the rock, about here. I can't believe it. Okay, it was all going so well. It was all going so well. And then that got stuck to the white paint. Okay, here we go again. And that's its tail. Maybe its head. Okay, and that will have to do. Hopefully that looks like a bird. And then let's get some white paint and just touch up that area. Okay, that will do. Okay, maybe not. get some paint, go a bit thicker. Okay, there we go. I think that will do. That and that look too similar, so let's try and change that. It's not going how I want it to go, but there you go. Maybe that's okay now. Having a think. Okay. Okay, that will have to do. I think it's okay. I think we have a slight problem here because there needs to be a bit more of a blue there, blue sky, and we can't quite see that, but maybe it's okay. I could just add blue. Ooh, dangerous. But let's try. This is an issue of readability, like when you look at it, can you actually see what's going on, that there's actually a gap there between the bird and the rock. And then what I'm going to do is just soften here. So once again I'm doing not restoration, well, I don't know, fixing kind of work, which is not good. But now I think it reads more clearly. So, finished. Now let's sign our painting. So I think I'm going to use white, because if I use red it's going to stick out too much. I guess I could use blue and use it down here. Let's try that. Ooh, I don't know what this is going to look like. Get a thick mix, dab it on here. It's not super thick, but quite thick. And then, white's better. I can tell that the blue, we're not going to see it enough. White will be better. Okay. Okay, here we go then. A dot there, along, up, round, down. Oh dear. It feels like something's working against me at the moment. Do you ever have that feeling? So that's what it feels like at the moment. Dot. And yeah, it's not perfect, but it's okay. Let's write that out. Goodness me. One of those days. Okay. Oh, it worked. Thank goodness. So there we go. The finished painting. Review time. So overall, I feel very happy with this painting. When I look at it, I think it works very well. I think the sky is powerful. I think the sparkle on the sea is particularly nice. That distant mountain looks very, very good. And the rocks are very dominant and powerful. And I suppose this dark and this dark, there's a kind of complement there that unites the painting. And when you use just a few colours, you're going to get similar colours in, or what would you call it, combination of colours like greys. You're going to get similar things like that in different parts of the painting that are going to help unite the painting. And I think that happens here. So yeah, very happy. And I'm glad I did the birds. I was hesitant about doing that. And I did have a lot of trouble, as maybe you saw, with this bird. But now, problem sorted. So let's go through each part of the painting and be a bit more analytical. So first of all, the sky. I'm very happy with it because I think I retained this white area, and it is very thick. So I was very surprised when I looked carefully at the painting, sorry, the photograph. So let me backtrack here. So when I did this painting originally, I left very little space for the white. And then when I went to do the painting a second or third time, for some reason, and luckily, maybe it was because I was planning this lesson, I looked a bit more carefully at the photograph, and I was surprised to see how big this white area was. It really surprised me. And yeah, I made a mental note to myself to make sure this white area is really big. And I knew that if I didn't leave this big white area, it wasn't going to work. And luckily, I did. And I think that's one reason why this sky is really powerful. So another reason why I love this sky is because there are some real dark greys in the sky. Now, when you go to do wet in wet, you might find that very difficult to achieve at first. It just comes with time. And to be honest, I found it very difficult sometimes with wet in wet to get super strong darks. And maybe that happened because the paint was almost dry, because if you look here, really we've got a dry brush edge. Yeah. So even though I said all of that, I still think the sky could be improved. Maybe it's a little bit messy here, my brushwork, if I'm being really finicky. And also just the patterns around here could maybe be a bit more beautiful. And these low clouds, this one's good, but this one is not quite so good. I think it could have a bit more of a better shape, perhaps. So if I was being really picky, maybe that's what I would say was not so good. So maybe I need to improve my cloud shapes a little bit more. Yeah. So next, this distant mountain. Really happy with this. It turned out really well. It's not easy to achieve that, to achieve a faint mountain, but you can still see it fairly clearly. It's very difficult. And I don't think I really need to say any more on that, except it is difficult to achieve that. But I think it really works well in this painting, and it adds an amazing depth to the painting. I suppose I could soften it a tiny bit more by just going over with a wash, but I wouldn't do that at this stage because I've got this here now, and I would be worried about getting this wet. Because when you go over a painting with water in order to soften it, it's not such a big deal when you're dealing with light colours like this. But as soon as you get dark colours like this or this, then there's a high probability you're going to shift the paint and it looks very ugly. But I'm happy with this. Then I'm also happy with this. Maybe I could have softened that, but I still think it's good. And yeah, I think the shape is good enough. Maybe it could be a little better, but I still think good enough. Just maybe it could be made a bit softer by going over with water. And then here, the dry brush is wonderful. I'm really happy with that. So yeah, nothing to add. It's really good. And I'm really happy with these rocks. I suppose I could have added more colour, but I kept this painting very simple because I wanted it to be a lesson, and so I didn't want to overcomplicate things by adding colours. But also, to be honest, sometimes when you do a painting and you don't have a lot of colours, it can actually be more powerful. Just in the same way that a black and white photo can sometimes be more powerful than a colourful photograph. The same with a painting. Fewer colours, colour variations can result in a far more powerful painting. And this painting is almost monotone, isn't it? I mean, if we took away that blue, it would maybe be a monotone painting. Now, the highlights, the last bit. And here, I think I did these rocks very well. But this one, it really went wrong. And I'm still not quite happy with that. And to be honest, I think the reason is because I just haven't looked carefully enough at the photograph. And also maybe I need to look at some rocks, even photos of rocks, and get ideas. So I think that's really the main reason why that is not as good as I would like it to be. I still think it's passable though. And I'm very happy with the reflections though. I think they look really good. And also these little waves, wavelets, these little waves. Is that a new word? Wavelets? So that's basically how I interpret this painting. Oh, and I'm very happy with the birds. So if I did this painting again, I would soften this. I would do a better job of this by studying rocks a bit more. And I would hope to get slightly better looking clouds. Yes. Okay, and my signature, I'm happy with that. It's small, it's neat, and it's slightly abstract, and it doesn't interfere with the overall painting. So that's my review. And now for the framed painting. And to be honest, I'm a bit disappointed with it. And you will see why soon. So here we go. Oops. Ooh, have to be careful. I've got wires everywhere. Ta-da! So, yeah, maybe it looks quite good. But why am I disappointed with this painting? Because I thought down here, the rocks I did were really beautiful. And it's hidden somewhat by the mat. And so this is one reason why you should put your paintings in a frame to see what they really look like. So if I paint this picture again, what I will do is make maybe the sea a bit higher, and I'll try and get more rocks in, because I'm a bit disappointed about that. So, and also my signature, you can hardly see it if you look carefully. It's cut off. So maybe this mat needs to be a bit bigger, or I need to pull the painting up a bit more. So I suppose I could pull the painting up a bit more. So things like that are very important. But I'm happy with the painting. I think I'm happy with the painting. But I did have a lot of difficulty with doing the white, didn't I? But maybe it's good for you to see me struggling sometimes. So anyway, that's all for this lesson. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do have a go at the painting, please let me know in the comments how it went and just how you found this video. I'd really appreciate it. Materials. So first of all, brushes. I used only 4 brushes, I think. So I used a flat brush that is about 1 inch in diameter, so 2.5 centimeters, this one. And then I used a pointed oval, and that's about just under 1/2 inch, maybe 3/8, I'm not sure, but about 1 centimeter. And I used, this is my equivalent of a liner brush. So this is basically a bamboo brush, a Japanese bamboo brush, and it's long and thin. And that's what you need, something long and thin. And then I have no idea what this is called, but it's like got a bulb here, and then it becomes really thin, like a bee's stinger. Maybe I should call it the stinger. Good name, right? But anyway, that's really good for signature, and I use that just for signature. So you don't really have to get this brush, but it's really good for that. And I don't think I used this, but I often use a mop brush, so I'll just let you know about that. But I don't think I used it in this painting. But that's about 1 centimeter, so again 3/8 of an inch, or about 1/2 inch. Okay, paints, where are they? Just a minute, here we go. So how many paints did I use? I think I used about 5 paints. Okay, where are my paints? Sadly, I haven't got all my paints with me. One of them is missing, Mr. Yellow Ochre. Anyway, here we go. So, my blues. So I use phthalo blue. I love phthalo blue because it's a super strong blue, and it gives me very, very strong dark colours. Then I've got my light blue, and it's cobalt turquoise light. So I just call that turquoise, and I love that colour. I think that's a beautiful colour. Then I've got a red, and I use alizarin crimson. And I think I only use that because the artist that I used to copy a lot used this one, and I like it. And I use yellow ochre, and so the yellow ochre is like kind of like it gives me my 3 primaries. So yellow ochre is really, it looks a bit like a brownie color, but I use it as a yellow. So that's my yellow, and then I've got my red and my 2 blues, and so I've got my 3 primaries there. And then finally titanium white, but any white will do. So, and the same with these other colors, just use what you've got, so don't worry too much about that. And then finally paper. So I'm really fussy about paper, so I use a spiral bound pad, and this one is 34 by 24 centimeters, which in inches is, just a minute, maybe I can see it, yeah, 13 by 9 inches. Oh, thank goodness for that. So I love this particular pad, but I really shouldn't tell you about it because I think you can only buy it in Japan. But I hope just to advertise this pad, not because I make any money from it, but it is so excellent. For me, it's better than Saunders and Waterford, and it's cheaper, and it's called Lamp Light, and it's really good. And the cover, well, the covers are super hard, which I think stops it buckling. This paper just doesn't buckle, and I have to say, I think if your paper's buckling and after it's dried it's not becoming flat again, then that paper is no good. It's going to be so difficult to do a good picture on that kind of paper. So what I recommend you do is become systematic. Go to your art shop and basically go through every single watercolor pad they've got until you find the one that is like the best quality for the best price. For me, this is like a good price and good quality, and I'm really happy with it, so I recommend you do that. So maybe I talked a bit too much about materials, so sorry about that. And that's it. And there will be in the description a list of the materials that I used, or actually there'll be a link to my website where you will find a list of the materials that I've talked about here. Okay, materials finished.